Now, before I get into this next part, I want to iterate that this series is not about exposing the industry or certain hip-hop artists as being associated with Satanism, so don't expect me to go into extreme details of the artists that are in this video. Remember, we are trying to find hip-hop's place in the church, not try to recognize what Satan is doing within the subculture. With that being said, let's continue. Since we've started this series, we can now conclude that hip-hop was not started in the church and had no intentions of bringing the morality of the Bible along with it. Some people may argue, well, just because it didn't start with Christ doesn't mean it's bad, right? Besides, it started with the bringing together of poverty-stricken people. Let's take the Tower of Babel, for example. People came together to build a great city and a tower to reach the heavens. Some may still say, what's wrong with that? As people of the earth, we should be unified, right? Only if it's under God's will. What the people of Babel were doing went against God's will for man. God didn't want man to build a great city for everyone to come live in. Instead, he wants man to multiply and fill the earth. Another example is the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were possibly living in harmony amongst themselves, but were great sinners against the Lord. But, needless to say, the two cities were destroyed by God. To get more depth on this subject, I provided a link to a video from the Fuel Project that explains the tower and its significance in detail. Jesus states in Matthew chapter 12, verse 30, "Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters." So no matter how good things may seem for man, if it is not in the will of God, then it is pointless. Hip-hop is not of God, and as we've seen earlier, it is against God by teaching that you yourselves are God. Knowing all that we know about hip-hop already, we can see that it is very easy for the devil to infiltrate the subculture with very little opposition. Besides, the very principle that hip-hop stands on are the same principles that the devil uses to deceive. In this next segment, we're going to show you how and around when Satan infiltrated the hip-hop subculture. One thing we know about Satan is that he loves to be worshipped. Unlike God, he doesn't care what you call him. He only cares about being seen openly, even if you don't recognize it. As stated earlier in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 14, he states, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High," meaning he wants to be worshipped like God. We must remember that Satan would do any and everything to gain worship, so that's why he's been known as the Great Deceiver. One of the reasons why Christians are constantly under fire from the world is because we are able to recognize and expose the signs, symbols, and behaviors that are influenced by Satan. He knows that if we constantly bring what he does to keep people in the dark into light, he will not be able to keep up the same act. So every so often he'll take the same symbols and behavior and change the names or switch its use. Every symbol and behavior conjured by Satan has a demon assigned to it, and whenever it's worn or used for worship, it gives that demon authority to control or manipulate the persons who are in possession of it. For example, there have been reports about people who have hung dream catchers over their beds while they sleep to catch the bad dreams, but instead end up having an increased number of bad dreams themselves. Hanging a dream catcher over your bed to protect you from bad dreams cancels out your protection from God. So since you have put your faith and trust into that object, God will no longer protect you. Some people may have it as a souvenir and say it doesn't affect them at all, but as a Christian, I highly recommend that if you have one, discard of it. An example is in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 15, when Samuel instructs King Saul to go and strike the city of Amalek and not to spare anything, no men, women, children, livestock, or spoils. But Saul kept the king Agag alive and kept everything that he thought was good, such as the fattened calves, lambs, and oxen. The Lord told Samuel that he has made a mistake making Saul king and to go remove him from power. Of course, Saul was confused and angry because he felt that he did exactly what the Lord wanted by destroying the Amalekites, but he didn't follow God's commandment of destroying everything and taking nothing from the land. In the same chapter, in the book of 1 Samuel, verse 22 and 23, Samuel tells Saul, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to listen is better than the fat of rams, for rebellion is as the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry." Clearly, God is saying that it is better to obey His word than to do what thou wilt, no matter how you feel about it. Now, people may say, if God is a good God, then why would He have innocent women and children killed? The answer is simple. It is because the Amalekites were great sinners of God. They could have been very wicked people who have already sacrificed themselves to false gods or even Satan himself. Now, the Bible doesn't go into detail of what their sins were, but by reading the text, we know that these people were far from God, and He despised them.